I slid the folded note onto the
Evelyn,
kitchen
Daniel,
table
come
while
on. I've
Daniel's
got
foot
coffee
hit the
and a
floor
place we can
behind
talk
him
this
and he
through.
said,
All right, fine.
"Evelyn."
Yes, thank you, Maya.
Betrayal tightened my
Daniel,
jaw the way
stop!
cold metal
You can't!
does when you pick it up
can't!
without gloves.
I have to, Evelyn.
I had written
Let go.
nothing long.
Daniel,
A line, two lines,
please.
enough to name why I was leaving and not to
Don't
beg.
go, Evelyn.
No,
I had practiced
I
the
have
motion
to.
of folding
Please,
the
we can
paper
fix
3
this.
times because
It's too
small,
late.
careful
Evelyn, wait.
gestures steadied me. I set my suitcase by the door, zipped it closed, and listened for what Daniel would do next. He shuffled toward the kitchen in his navy shirt, eyes still heavy with sleep. His expression was flat like the familiar plates in the cupboard, arranged even. He saw the note and his face changed the way a photograph frays at the edge. He did not look angry so much as measured. "Evelyn," he said again, and used my name like a test. I kept my hands empty. I reached for nothing. My voice stayed low. "I can't stay, Daniel." He put a hand on the back of a chair and did not sit. "We can talk about this." "You can't mean this." Suspicion came first, then a slow knot of hurt that moved my hands to the suitcase handle. The suspicion had been there for months, small pauses in his sentences, a habit of checking the hallway before he answered the door. But this morning I had transformed that suspicion into a decision. I had chosen the form the decision would take. Quiet, firm, no argument. That choice was the reason the note existed. We had shared routines to the point of muscle memory. I fed the cat at 7, he brewed coffee at 7:30. I knew which shirt he would pick if he had a meeting. Those facts had not saved me from the growing difference between the person I became each morning and the person I found across the living room. I folded the edge of the note between my thumb and forefinger, the motion that steadied me when my throat felt like it might close. Daniel stepped closer. He kept his voice low and controlled, as if volume could repair momentum. "Evelyn, what is this?" "Please, it's a goodbye," I said. "I am leaving now." He inhaled sharply. "Why like this? Why not talk?" I met his eyes. His speech always returned to reason. Lists, schedules, what would be lost. I did not want to be counted among his items. I did not want a debate over practicality to become an argument about my right to leave. We were 3 steps into the hallway when my gaze fell to his jacket on the coat rack. A small white envelope peeked from the inner pocket, and a second set of keys hung on a different ring I had never seen before. The keys looked like the keys to an unconspaced life, polished, anonymous. My fingers tightened on the suitcase handle. Daniel noticed me glance and jerked as if something pinched him. He covered the pocket with his palm. "Those are just spare keys for work." I had already moved. I reached for the jacket with the slow certainty of someone retrieving a labeled box from a shelf. I felt my pulse in my throat. I slid the envelope from the pocket with one finger. The invoice inside carried a name I did not recognize and an address that was not ours. The corners of the paper were clean. The amount was paid on a card with the last 4 digits I had never seen. The paper was small, the language direct, a paid statement, an appointment confirmation. The address was 2 blocks from our building. The invoice was not a metaphor, it was a concrete object. The number printed at the top matched a phone number I did not know. I tucked the sheet back into the jacket with the movement of someone closing a lid on evidence. Daniel's face went still. He had the same measured pause he used before he made a difficult decision at work. "Evelyn, I can explain." "Explain what, Daniel?" I said. I did not raise my voice. I used his name because his name kept us tethered to what we both had chosen once. "Who is this for?" He clasped his hands behind his back, a gesture he used when thinking, rehearsed and slow. "It's complicated." "It isn't what you rethinking." Doubt shifted to alarm in me. I heard the exact words I had been trying to avoid. "Is there another woman?" I had practiced not asking and practiced how I would react if I found out. Quiet, steady, leaving without spectacle. Now the practiced reaction met the concrete object in his jacket. "Is there another woman?" I asked. Daniel's jaw tightened along the scar at his left cheek. He swallowed. "Not like that." "Then explain the keys and the invoice." My hand did not shake when I put the paper on the table. My pulse made small, even beats under my wrist. He paced once, a measured step, then back. His voice lowered. "The keys are for a storage unit. I had to move some client files. The invoice is it's for a contractor who did some work at the office." He sounded practiced. He sounded like someone giving a prepared reply. "You keep a contractor invoice in your jacket at home. You keep spare keys for a unit 2 blocks away that you never mentioned." I said each question like a short, clear instrument. He shook his head once. I didn't think it would matter. I didn't want to worry you over work. That was a line he used when he wanted to close cracks with calm. It had worked on other small things. A missed anniversary dinner, a forgotten errand. It did not work on the fact that I could see his jacket pocket and the second ring of keys. It did not work on the way my throat felt raw with the knowledge that he had been keeping things separate from me. We moved to the doorway. The hallway light cut a cold rectangle across the floor. My suitcase sat like a small island at my feet. A neighbor's door opened at the other end, and I saw Mrs. Alvarez's slippers on the mat. She peeked out with a concerned face and then closed her door when she noticed us. Her presence was quiet. She had been a constant in the building for years, a person who knew how to offer a mug and not ask too many questions. Daniel extended a hand toward my arm. "Evelyn, please. Don't go like this, we can talk. Give me a chance." I stepped back. I felt my shoulder lift and fall with the rhythm I used when I breathed to steady myself before speaking at work. I could have argued. I could have thrown the invoice on the table and demanded a confession. Instead, I kept my voice small and even. "No, Daniel. I won't let this become one more thing we fix with an explanation I won't believe." His hand hovered in the air, not touching me. There were 3 rapid lines of argument that rose in him, one about appearances, one about our shared life, one about consequences. They came out clipped and quick. "Evelyn, think about the lease. Think about the cat. Think about... Daniel," I cut in. "I have thought you can't just leave. You can't leave like this." He sounded close to pleading, which was not his usual tone. I remembered sharply how he used to clasp my hand when we crossed busy streets, how he used to smooth my hair from my forehead when I was sick. Those memories were concrete, his palm against my hair, the heat of his skin on a winter night, and they did not change the present. They made the choice harder in ways that had nothing to do with logic. "I am leaving now," I said. "I packed light because I wanted to be ready. I won't argue. I won't meet you at the door." Daniel moved faster then, sudden, breaking his usual reserve. "Evelyn, please." He took 2 steps and reached a second time. His voice lost its careful edges. I stepped past his hand. My shoulder brushed his fingers. I felt the brief warmth and the space open up behind me. I closed the door gently. I did not slam it. The click of the lock was small and exact. That sound was the peak of everything we'd been avoiding. For a moment the building felt ordinary again. The hum of the heater, the distant sound of a person running water, the building's old radiator making its usual sigh. My suitcase weight pulled at my wrist. I walked down the stairwell 1 step at a time. My breathing counted the steps. I paused at the landing and met Mrs. Alvarez there, already waiting with a thermos wrapped in a dish towel. She held it out like someone offering a lifeline. "Here, Mija, coffee. It will keep you going." Her voice had the steady cadence of someone who had watched other departures from that very stairway, young couples breaking up, a tenant moving out after a job loss, a son who left with a duffel bag. She placed a hand on my sleeve as if to test my temperature. I accepted the thermos with both hands, the metal warm through the cloth. "Gracias, Mrs. Alvarez," I said. She gave me a small impatient smile. "You are doing the right thing, Hija. You keep your head. You keep your suitcase." Her words were not a sermon. They were a practical map. I sat on the 3rd step and held the thermos like a fragile package. Somewhere below us someone started a car and then turned it off. An elevator dinged in the distance. The building door unlocked and a delivery person came in, muttering as he balanced a box. At the corner cafe across the street, I picked a table facing the building. My suitcase sat at my feet like a patient animal. I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket. The paper lay flat and small. I did not want to unfold it again. I did not want to examine the words I had written. I wanted the act of leaving to be the thing that defined the morning. The barista, Marco, a man with a close buzz and quick hands, brought me a coffee without asking. He knew the patrons by their orders. He set the cup down and said, "On the house this morning." His voice was brisk, but not intrusive. "Thank you, Marco," I said. I lifted the cup and felt the heat move through my fingers. I watched the building across the street. The window curtains moved in a slow, mechanical way. Someone hammered in an apartment 2 floors up. Daniel's window remained closed. I did not call him. I did not open my phone. I sat and let the city make its usual noises. A bus braking, a dog barking, a bicycle bell. At the third sip I felt the nervous edge soften. The coffee tasted of roasted nuts and the sugar I did not need. My fingers smoothed the linen of my cardigan. I touched the worn gold ring on my right hand, a small, deliberate habit I had kept since my grandmother gave it to me, and it steadied me. Back in the apartment, Daniel moved through rooms like someone tracing an empty map. He opened drawers. He set the kettle to boil and then turned it off without pouring. He unfolded the note I had left and read it once, twice. His face was blank when he looked up at the window and then at the street. He called the number on the invoice and listened without answering a single question. When he hung up, he ran his fingers across his forehead and then slid the jacket back onto the rack. I watched the street from the cafe as if I could see into the apartment from the window. I saw Mrs. Alvarez close her door and plant a small pot of basil on her window ledge. I saw the delivery person wheel away a box. None of those ordinary movements removed the fact of the invoice or the keys. They only rearranged small details of the morning. In the second hour I did something I had not planned. I pulled the note from my pocket and read it once more. The lines were spare. I had written that I needed space, that I could not be part of a life that hid things from me, that I was leaving to keep my dignity. The words were practical, without flourish. They were written to be read and acted upon, not to persuade. A man at the next table asked if I was all right. I said, yes, because I was. My chest still tightened at times. My hands still trembled when I thought of Daniel's careful gestures and a jacket pocket that had become a secret drawer. But I knew I would not undo what I had already done. I had stepped past his outstretched hand. I had closed the door. Those moves were physical facts. Around mid-morning I felt a small panic flare had I left anything undone. I stood and went to the window and watched a woman with a stroller cross the street. A baby started to cry. The sound snapped something taut inside me, and for a second I considered calling. I did not. Instead I walked to the counter and paid for a second cup to bring with me. I left the cafe and walked a block to a small bus stop. I sat on the bench, my suitcase beside me, and watched the building where we had shared a life. The sun had climbed and painted the street in a warm, amber light that made the bricks look softer. The sight of the light should have been consolation. Instead it mapped the difference between what had been arranged and what had become. At noon I took a bus to a friend's apartment and left my suitcase there for the day. I did not stay long. I walked until my legs ached, because motion helped me think in a way sitting did not. I thought of the invoice and of Daniel's way of clasping his hands behind his back. I thought of Mrs. Alvarez handing me the thermos and of Marco setting down the coffee with exact, quick movements. By late afternoon I knew what I had to do next. Find a temporary room, sort mine from ours, notify the cat's sitter. Those tasks were concrete and immediate. They required lists, calls, small practical arrangements. They also required me to keep the calm I had practiced. When I called the sitter, she asked if Daniel was there and if he was angry. I told her he had the note and that he would manage. She promised to come that evening to take care of the cat. I hung up and breathed like someone who has run a short distance and then stopped. My breaths were quick but regular. Back in the apartment, Daniel poured coffee and left the note unfolded on the kitchen table. He did not call me. He did not move toward the door. He sat and stared at the paper. His leather watch lay face down beside the cup. He pressed a finger against the crease of the note, as if he could smooth the fault out of it by touch alone. He whispered, more to himself than to anyone, "Evelyn," he my name like an open map. He picked up the paper and read the lines aloud slowly, testing their edges. I sat on a friend's balcony when my phone vibrated once. I did not answer. The small, deliberate silence was its own statement. I had left to keep my dignity. The day had been full of small mercies. Mrs. Alvarez's thermos, Marco's coffee, the sitter's promise. Those were not dramatic rescues. They were practical steadiness. They were kindness handed to me in the form of hot liquid and new plans. Later that evening I walked past our building and did not go inside. Daniel's window was lit. The note I had left was still unfolded on our kitchen table, exposed. I could see his silhouette as he moved across the small rectangle of light. He set the kettle on and then didn't turn it on. He traced the paper once more and then folded it slowly and put it in his jacket pocket. He picked up his keys and stood at the front window for a long, unmeasured minute. He did not go out. He did not follow. He simply stood and watched the street where I had walked away. He set the keys down on the table again, and then, finally, he reached for the phone. He did not dial the number on the invoice. He typed a new message and then deleted it. He folded the note and left it between the plates like something that belonged there now, an unsettled object in a place of routine. Daniel sat at our kitchen table, the note unfolded before him. He let his hand hover over the paper and did not follow. The car brakes so close that gravel pops under the tires and Daniel steps out, hand still pinching the folded note between his fingers. Betrayal burns like a hot coin along my tongue. I feel it as a tightening across my ribs that makes me breathe through my mouth. "Evelyn," he says, and the single word arrives like an accusation carried on the wind. I pull my suitcase by the handle and keep my back to him because turning would be answering whatever he expects. Outside, the street lamp throws a narrow pool of light. Beyond it, the building's shadow eats faces. The central problem is obvious in the first motion. He will not let me leave quietly, and I must get past him without undoing the small, deliberate mercy of what I already did. I had left the paper on the kitchen table 2 hours earlier, a note folded small so that the words would not be read as a speech. The note named the decision without pleading. It sat next to the coffee mug Daniel never rinses. I remember the way the kitchen tile hummed under my feet when I slid the note into place, and the way his footfall sounded on the stair the second after. Memory gives me a clear timeline I can use now. I do not argue about the past. I act on the decision that followed it. My suitcase bumps against the curb as I shift its weight and listen for movement behind me. Daniel's coat is the same charcoal I have seen in photos of his office, pressed even when he steps from a car. He fumbles the note in a way that looks rehearsed and then, as if finding his line, lifts his chin. "Evelyn, you can't do this like this," he says. His voice is low and steady, the voice that stops other people's questions. Tonight it is meant to stop me. I keep walking. My breath comes in measured pulls. I remember a small detail from the kitchen. When I folded the paper, I folded the corner twice to keep the line that mattered inside. I had practiced calmness in my throat. I practice it again now. He closes the distance faster than I expect and puts a hand on my arm. The contact is a test. Pressure at the joint, a claim that my movement belongs to him. "Daniel, let go," I say. My voice is soft, but the words are set. He does not let go. The concierge Marco has appeared on the steps, his jacket buttoned wrong, watching like someone deciding whether to break a rule. The presence of Marco turns a private tug into a public scene. The entrance light cuts across Daniel's face and shows the scar along his jaw. The scar seems to move when he measures me. Marco stays a few steps back, but his eyes are careful. He shifts his weight so that leaving would mean passing him. The tension changes. I had expected the confrontation to be private and clean. Instead, a neighbor becomes an accidental witness, and the stakes change because now other people will remember what happened on the stoop. My pulse ticks under the thin skin of my wrist. I feel fear move into my muscles, into the way my fingers tighten on the suitcase handle. Fear is not a description. It is the short, cold pulse that knocks at the base of my skull and makes my knees ask permission to fold. I step sideways to keep the wheelchair ramp between us and to keep the taxi driver, who I can see watching, from being forced into the center of a fight I refuse to make. Daniel pulls a phone from his pocket with a thumb that lands a little too hard on the screen. He taps and a bright rectangle shows him my name and, beneath it, a bank notification preview. He catches the light and looks at me as if the screen proves something. "You left me a note, and you leave without telling me why," he says. Marco coughs. I look at the phone and then at Daniel's hand. The bank notice is small, but the subject line is blunt. Recent account activity. My stomach drops to a place where there is a hard, bright ache. The discovery shifts the balance. What I thought would be only a clean walk becomes a test of how much of my life he already controls. I inhale and let a short sentence steady me. "Daniel, give me the car key and let this end now." My voice does not waver. He lifts his shoulders, a short, controlled shrug, the defense he uses when a meeting goes off plan. "You left the note," he says. "So many people will ask. Marco will ask and I can't." He does not finish. He thinks of reputation the moment before he thinks of me. You think I care about reputation more? I say, and I do not wait for an answer. I turn toward the taxi. The driver has moved closer, pretending to check his meter. The corner of Daniel's mouth tightens. He steps in front of me, and his stance says he plans to refuse passage. A taxi door opens and a woman steps out with a small storm of breath and restless hands. "Evelyn," Maya says, and her voice has the sharpness of someone who pressed send on a message and then ran. Maya had come because my last text was a short line. "I can't talk, be here." She moves between us with the forward motion of someone who has made a choice and will hold to it. "Daniel, step back," she says. "Let her go." Maya's presence changes something vital. Where there had been 2 people, there are now 3, and witnesses multiply the cost of any decision. Marco, who had been silent, clears his throat like a man aware that a building's reputation matters less than a woman's right to leave. Daniel's hand goes from my arm toward my suitcase. He snatches at the handle with a motion taught in families where things are possessions to be kept. "You can't take that," he says, as if luggage was a marriage certificate. Maya reaches for the case. "Daniel, stop it," she says. Her voice is quick and clipped. The exchange becomes a fast set of short lines, a small argument that rehearses power. "Maya, don't get involved," Daniel says. "Maya, it's not your—" "It is my business when my friend is shoved," Maya replies. I watch his face as he measures Maya. There is surprise there, then calculation. He shifts his weight, then reaches again. Marco, who has been inching forward, steps between Daniel and the suitcase with a hand out like a bouncer enforcing a boundary. "Hey, that's far enough," Marco says. His voice carries the kind of authority that comes from seeing many fights and choosing sides quietly. Daniel counters by producing a key from his pocket, holding it up as if the gesture proves legitimacy. He shows the key to Marco and then to me. "I still have your apartment key," he says. He says it with a flatness that makes the key a tool and not a betrayal. The revelation lands like a small cold stone in the middle of the step. He has a key, he has entered. The details of what I thought private are now concrete and provable. My reaction is physical. My jaw clenches and I feel a flare of anger that feeds into calmness. Anger gives me other facts to use. The emotion moves me. My hand slides into my pocket and I pull out the small envelope I had set aside with a copy of a bank notice I printed earlier. I had not planned to show it. I had only wanted it as a record. Now I hold something that matches the rectangle on his screen. Daniel squints when he sees it. "Where did you get that?" he asks. His tone tightens. I do not hand the paper to him. I prepared for what I'd need. I say, "This is my decision. Please let me pass." My sentence is short, like packing a door shut around the room. The argument tightens into a rapid exchange. "You left without talking." Daniel snaps. "You think you can just—" "I told you why in the note," I say. "I wrote it so I wouldn't beg. You think that's how things end?" He fires back. "Daniel, enough." Maya says, "Evelyn is leaving." "You don't get to stop her." Daniel names me by my full name, the tone of someone who calls a file to order. The 3 of us trade lines fast. Each line is a tactic. My heart picks up speed, but I keep my face even. The sequence of short lines is a pressure cooker. Marco steps nearer and for the first time raises a hand to show he will call the building manager if needed. Daniel suddenly produces his phone again and scrolls quickly. He holds up a bank notification with a different subject line now. "Joint account frozen." His breath makes the small rectangle flicker. "Oliver's on his way," Daniel says. The name lands in the air like a formal threat. Oliver is Daniel's lawyer. He is the person I have heard about in conversations that never included me. The reveal reorients the fight. This is no longer a relationship argument, it is a legal pressure. My mouth goes dry. The ground under my suitcase feels suddenly lighter because I might have to travel without money. The practical obstacle appears in full light. He has the leverage to make things difficult. A taxi horn honks. I use the noise to make a short decision audible. "Daniel, give me the key or there will be no point in arguing now," I say. I keep my tone controlled so that no one can claim I invited chaos. He hesitates. For a beat, the man I knew as calmly distant looks like someone surprised by the escalation he pushed. Marco shifts his weight and moves like someone who has to choose between rules and a human being in front of him. He steps closer to the driver and says quietly, "Do you want me to call the police?" It is not an empty offer. The building keeps a log. Daniel's eyes flick to Marco, then to Maya, then to me. He calculates the cost. The small twist comes when a taxi door opens further and the driver, instead of closing the trunk, leans in and says to me plainly, "Miss Evelyn, get inside now." The driver's voice is a practical voice, the kind that answers a call for distance with motion. Maya hurries and pulls one corner of my suitcase. I slide in with practiced movements. Daniel touches my wrist to stop me. His fingers close like a trap. He thinks that a wrist hold will be what finally roots me. He clamps down with a firm hand. The grip is not loud. "It is a quiet, physical demand. Don't make me take this further," he says. The words are meant to be a promise and a threat wrapped into one. I do not yield. I plant my feet and pull my arm free with a single, controlled movement that uses his own momentum. My body moves with a precision that comes from deciding earlier that I would not be the person who stayed because someone held on to the handle of my life. I step into the taxi and close the door behind me so that metal separates us. The action, pulling free and closing the door, resolves the immediate hold. The man outside is left with a paper in his hand and something like astonishment on his face. Maya slams her palm once against the seat back in relief, and then covers her mouth, because she had been certain of a different outcome. Inside the cab we hurtle away under sodium light and the city passing as an anonymous blur. Maya asks once, "Are you sure?" Her words are quick and bright with worry. "Yes," I say, "I am sure." I hold the small envelope of my documents close to my chest like a map of what comes next. My hands are steady. The relief is not sudden. It arrives as a thinning of the held breath I had kept since I left the note. Fear loosens. That is an emotional shift. Betrayal to fear to a narrow, cautious relief. I let the relief sit for a minute, and then I start to think about the next problem. Joint finance is frozen, a key that grants access, possibilities of legal pressure. At Maya's apartment, she pushes open her spare room and makes a space on a narrow bed for my suitcase. I unpack one familiar object first, a cream scarf I wrap around the handle, and move slowly because each small domestic action anchors me. She watches me with the blunt concern of a friend who saw a scuffle and plans to repair it with pragmatic steps. "We will call the bank first thing," Maya says. "And I will come with you, thank you," I say. I avoid long explanations. I read the note aloud once to myself in a low voice, not to rehearse a defense, but to remind me of the boundary I crossed. The note's words are brief and factual. I do not wish to expand them by argument. Then my phone buzzes on the nightstand. I pick it up and the lock screen shows a message flagged from my bank. Access attempts detected. Joint account frozen. The notification is concrete and exact. My stomach tightens in a different way. This is a new problem. I say aloud, "They froze it." Maya leans over and reads the text. Her face moves through a sequence of practical emotions, surprise, annoyance, then a quick plan forming. "We will call now," she says. Marco appears in the hallway with his hand on the banister and says he saw the whole thing from his doorway and will sign a witness statement if we need it. Each of these outside actions reshapes the problem and moves it from private to public. My mind replays the kitchen scene because memory should be concrete. The way the note sat folded near the coffee ring on the wooden table, the mug with 2 teeth marks in its glaze where Daniel chews his lip at meetings. I recall the exact line I wrote, short and final, and the small practiced calm I used to fold it. That earlier action is now the hinge of everything. The twist, Daniel's key, the frozen account, Oliver's name, changes the consequences of the note. I had planned a quiet departure. I had not planned a sudden logistical fight. The revelation forces me to act differently. When I call the bank, the hold is real and the voicemail is procedural. The agent reads policy lines and asks security questions about accounts and signatories that require answers I do not have if my access is blocked. Maya speaks to the agent for a long time with a directness I admire. She gives my name, explains my situation, and insists on next steps. Her voice makes the bank listen in a way my soft tones never would. "This is Evelyn, her friend Maya. She is with me now," she says, and the line becomes official. The scene alters because another person is willing to speak loudly enough to be recorded. Later, when the city light softens to the pale of approaching morning, I sit with one small pile of things on Maya's dresser. The cream scarf, the worn gold ring I leave behind in the apartment, because I don't want the ring to be an argument tool, my linen cardigan folded flat. The physical act of leaving items behind is less about giving and more about removing temptation. My hands move deliberately. I count the moves like steps in a small liturgy: pack, close, leave. Each motion is an expression of quiet courage that does the work phrases cannot. This is another emotional shift from frantic fear to an economy of choices that feel like control. The chapter's mid-climax arrives when my phone receives a new message, a photograph of a bank statement with a note: joint accounts flagged, lawyer notified. The image is Daniel's handwriting across the top, and it shows the name Oliver again. The twist reframes the earlier scene. This is not merely a domestic refusal, it is a legal escalation. I feel the fresh, raw worry of someone who planned for a single small rupture and now must face a system that can freeze funds. The change is sudden and practical. It demands new steps rather than longer reflection. Maya sits beside me and says, "We will get receipts, we will get witnesses. Marco saw everything. You have the note. We will make sure your decisions are documented." Her words are tools, not platitudes. I respond with a short list of things I need her to do. Call the bank again, find our old emails with statements, make copies of the note, find the lease. The practical plan forms in spiky movements. A call here, a copy there, a witness statement from Marco. Each action reshapes the emotional landscape into a registry of facts. Outside, the building's night lights flip off one by one. Daniel stands on the curb with his coat collar turned up and the folded paper still pinched in his hand. He looks momentarily as if he might move again, but when he sees Marco approaching with a pen and a willingness to speak, he steps back and folds his shoulders inward. There is an echo of something like regret in his face, but it is small and quickly smoothed away. I watch him from the thin window in Maya's spare room and feel the last of the immediate hold lift, because he no longer has my wrist in his hand. The final concrete beat of the chapter is a message that arrives on my locked phone from an unknown number. Oliver will call tomorrow morning with questions about the account. The statement is a promise and an obstacle. I place the phone screen down and put a mug of tea, Maya's mug, near my hand so that the steam marks a measurable, ordinary thing in the room. The chapter closes without speeches. A list of new steps, witnesses who will sign statements, and an impending call from a lawyer that will force me to defend a decision I have already made. I fold my hands around the warm cup and feel the faint lemon scent of Maya's tea, and then the phone buzzes again with a calendar reminder that says simply, "Bank appointment, 9 a.m. I stand, move to the window, and watch Daniel walk away along the curb, small and precise in the same charcoal coat he used to find certainty. I do not follow him. I hold the suitcase handle with both hands and feel less like a person dragged and more like a person who has set a direction and kept to it. The chapter ends with the taxi's taillights disappearing down the block and the concrete fact of the account freeze waiting like a problem to be solved. The last line is not a vow or a flourish. It is a practical deadline. Oliver will call in the morning and we will answer. Emotion route. Betrayal, emotion shifts. Betrayal, fear, relief. Fear, anger, calm, resolve. I ran down the stairwell with the cheap suitcase knocking against my calves, and Daniel stepped onto the landing, his body filling the narrow space, the folded note pinched between his fingers. Betrayal sat behind my ribs like a hot coin. The word had shape and weight, and it pushed my feet forward. My name, Evelyn. The single question aimed to stop me, aimed to turn the motion back to where it started. I kept moving. The stairwell smelled of damp paint and old shoe leather. My hand closed tighter around the suitcase handle until my knuckles ached. I had left the note on the kitchen table hours earlier, a short set of sentences that named what I would not argue over. I remembered the weight of that paper in my palm, the way I folded it twice, careful not to write more. That memory was concrete. The table's grain under my fingertips, the soft click of the kettle leaving the stove, Daniel's footfall in the hallway the moment I slid the paper away. Those specific details brought back a policy of small acts, quiet, precise, the plan I had followed to leave without spectacle. He remained on the landing, the note visible in his hand. Daniel's face held a control I recognized from years of measured replies and careful timing. His jaw set, the pale scar along his left cheek catching the stairlight. His eyes were narrowed. "Evelyn," he said again, voice low and steady, the kind of voice that had kept dinner conversations civil and arguments clipped. There was a new edge now, tighter than propriety. I felt doubt spike. Would he let this go? Would he tell me I had no right? Would he make me stay? The doubt pushed through my throat and came out as action. I stepped past him. He reached out, not to touch my arm, but to pin the paper between his thumb and forefinger, as if the note itself justified interference. Give me that. Daniel. His hand was soft around the paper, but his posture did all the stopping. Daniel, I'm leaving, I said, and the words were short on purpose. Saying them stretched the air between us into something practical rather than pleading. Outside, gravel popped under a car tire and Mrs. Cortez, who lived one floor up, opened her door and leaned on the rail in her robe. Her face showed the same curiosity she had shown when she found a misplaced package for me last month. She watched us. Her presence made the choice public. I had intended to leave privately. Instead, the stairwell had become a small stage with witnesses. The argument that followed tried to reconstruct years into a single sentence. Daniel's voice stayed even, measured by habit, but his words began to reveal the fear beneath the control. You can't just, he started and then stopped. As if the sentence might become a contract. You can't leave without talking, he said finally. My name like a demand. I breathed through it and kept my hand on the suitcase. I already told you what I could, I answered. I walked down the last step with deliberate care. My feet found the concrete edge exactly as they had the night I first moved in. I kept that reference locked to prove I could leave without losing direction. The taxi idled at the curb, yellow light reflecting on the hood like a promise. The driver watched us with polite impatience. Daniel followed me onto the sidewalk. He came down in long strides, coat flaring, and reached for the note in my pocket with a single, quick motion. His fingers closed on the cloth of my coat instead of the paper. I stepped back to put distance between his hand and my body. The movement made the conflict public in a different way. A neighbor crossing the street, a delivery bike rider slowing, the taxi driver folding his arms on the steering wheel. Mrs. Cortez's eyes stayed on us. Daniel, don't touch me, I said. Saying his name anchored the boundary. He blinked slowly. Evelyn, give me the note. We can talk. We'll figure something out. Those 3 sentences were meant to sound reasonable, to offer a path that preserved his version of home. I didn't take it. I held my suitcase strap with both hands. A taxi stopped and the driver stepped out, hood still on, lantern light painting the pavement. He stayed a polite meter away, hands in his pockets. You need a lift, miss? He asked, eyes flicking to Daniel. I said yes to the driver without arranging it as a question to Daniel. The act of getting into that cab was my refusal to negotiate indefinitely. Daniel moved closer, and beneath the streetlight's hard circle, his voice stripped of measured lines. The control cracked. Do you know what this will do? He said instead of asking. He didn't say what this would be at first. He let the suggestion hang. I saw his mouth thin. Then he added, people will hear things. There are names attached to us, Evelyn. You know how this looks. The words were a threat disguised as worry, and the meaning landed precise. A new fear asserted itself in me. Fear of exposure, fear of consequences I had not counted on. Emotion shifted again, doubt to fear to a cool calculation. I did not answer at once. I felt the bag's strap in my hands, the coarse weave pressing into my palm. Maya's name came out of my mouth like a tool. Maya can take me, the name acted. Saying it arranged help. Daniel's eyes flicked up. He measured the possibility of that help against his own fear. Then Maya appeared from the corner where she never should have been on time. She stepped around the delivery van with a travel mug in hand and a jacket thrown over one shoulder. She had the key ring and a holdall that looked like it had been packed for errands rather than rescue. Evelyn, she said simply, and she stood between us. Her arrival moved the tension sideways. Daniel tested a smile and failed. The measured man now had to contend with intervention. Maya, Daniel, as if her name alone might shift the ground back in his favor. The exchange turned quick. Let her go, Daniel. Maya, she needs to leave. Maya's voice was flat, not pleading. Flatness carries authority. She put one hand briefly on my elbow, an offer of steadiness. Mrs. Cortez shifted on her rail and then closed her door slowly. She did not come down. You don't understand what's at stake, Daniel, and this time his words were unmasked. He leaned toward Maya and me both, the note now crumpled inside his palm. If she walks away, there will be consequences. Names get said, files get moved. That isn't harmless. He stopped, searching for a reply that would balance threat and plea. His voice had become smaller and rawer. I saw the fear in the line at the edge of his mouth, a man imagining loss and grasping for ways to keep order. Maya's hand tightened around my sleeve. Then you'll have to live with the things you do, she said. Her words were precise and cold. Let her go, Daniel. There was a beat where the three of us held our breath. Not in a figurative way, but in the measured physical manner my body had when the kettle boiled, listening for a sound. For me, the listening was practical. Where would the taxi go? Would I get the front seat? Could I force my suitcase into the trunk without him reaching in? Daniel's composure broke along the seam. He reached toward the small suitcase, his fingers finding the handle. Evelyn, he began. I pulled the bag back. He grabbed it. The handle slipped between our fingers. That was the moment the argument became a struggle. Daniel, don't. Maya, stepping forward. Her voice rose 2 notches, and then pulled down again. Daniel, let go. The 3 quick lines that followed were sharp and fast. Let go. Stop. You re-hurting her. The neighbor's window upstairs clicked. Someone laughed softly, then stopped when they heard the tone in our voices. A camera phone lit up across the street in someone's hand. The public became a witness whether I wanted it or not. He held onto the suitcase with one hand, and I tightened my grip on the strap with the other. The handle tilted. The zipper caught on his wrist. My fingers ached. He pulled harder, and I stepped toward the taxi, a clear movement that showed intent. The driver watched the exchange and reached for the door. He looked at me and then at Daniel as if choosing the side of the story he would later recount. Evelyn, please, Daniel. The phrase folded into a softer register as if begging might coax me back. Then he said more darkly, think about what you re-breaking. Those words carried the unspoken addition. I will make you pay for it. I felt the urge to answer with a speech against threats, but I kept to small, factual lines. I'm not staying to be made afraid, Daniel. I'm not bargaining. Saying those sentences aloud pushed the decision into the world where actions mattered more than feeling. The taxi driver's hand landed on the rear door handle. He opened it in one smooth motion and leaned back. I shoved the suitcase into the cab and then climbed in myself. Daniel's hand found my sleeve for an instant. His fingers brushed the linen of my cardigan and then slid off. He did not try to pull me back into the stairwell. Instead, he let himself be seen, standing on the curb, one palm outstretched, the other crumpling the note. Inside the taxi, I sat facing the window and watched him on the curb. He watched me too. For a long moment there was no speech, just the measured line of his shoulders and the small motion of his fingers as he opened and closed his hand. Then he slipped the thin silver band from his wedding finger and dropped it into his pocket without ceremony. The simple movement changed the story's punctuation. It was not a speech. It was not an argument. It was a private surrender made public by the fact of being seen. Emotion shifted again from immediate fear to a slow, steady relief that felt like a muscle releasing. I felt a clarity that was not triumphant but practical. I had started this leave to reclaim ordinary things. Privacy, peace, a life where I was not measured by what I let others say about me. The taxi moved away with soft engine noise under the dawn. The city began to open its eyes in narrow intervals of light along the buildings. As the cab rolled, the driver spoke once, quiet and matter of fact. Where to, miss? He said, and I told him Maya's address. He nodded without comment. We passed Mrs. Cortez's doorway. She stood at the rail and closed it before I could look back. The taxi turned the corner and the city swallowed the scene. Daniel remained on the curb, hands in his pockets, dress coat pulled tight to hide the absence of his ring. At a light I thought of the note and took it from my pocket. I had not meant to read it again, but fingers find words the way they find a seam in fabric. The handwriting was my own, restrained, careful. No pleas, no recriminations. Just a few sentences arranged to make a life possible. I am leaving. I will not fight. I would like to keep the things that are mine. Please do not follow me. The page smelled faintly of lemon soap because I had washed my hands before I wrote. Those precise details, the soap, the fold, the curve of the pen stroke, made the choice real and small. The taxi stopped at Maya's building. She was at the door with a mug, hair tucked into a messy knot, eyes already waiting. She came close without ceremony and lifted my suitcase from my lap. You did it, she said. The sentence was not celebration so much as recognition. Her eyes scanned my face and softened when she saw how tight my jaw had been and how the faint dimple in my left cheek was pressed flat from worry. "You called me earlier?" I asked. The question needed a practical answer. Maya nodded. "I packed something," she said. "Coffee's on the stove. Sit. Breathe." She led me up 2 flights to her small kitchen. The apartment smelled of ground coffee and a faint trace of lavender from a sachet she kept in the drawer. She put the suitcase on the floor near the counter and handed me a towel to wipe my hands. I placed the folded paper on her kitchen table the way I had placed it on mine that morning. The table's grain was a similar pale oak. The light came through blinds in a slant that made the paper's edge bright. I breathed and counted the small details. The steam from the kettle curling in a clear line, the sound of a spoon tapping the mug's side, the clink of the sugar jar's lid. Those things were not metaphors. They were the day remaking itself into a practical sequence. Maya sat opposite me and slid a mug across the table. "What did he say?" she asked. She used my name, and the question was direct. I told her in short sentences the threats and the way he had tried to make the decision about my life for me. I told her how he had said names would be said, files moved, consequences implied. My voice stayed level because the clarity of facts made the narrative manageable. Maya frowned and then reached across to pick up the note. "You wrote this?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes." "You left it on the table." She read the words and then folded the paper once, twice, into a smaller square, the exact motion I had used that morning. The repeated action tied the 2 places together. My kitchen table and hers, the leaving and the arrival. We talked in short sentences that rearranged plans. "Maya, what I wanted to take." I answered by naming a few practical items. The worn gold ring on my right hand for now, the cardigan, my watch. She about a job, a number to call, whether I wanted to file anything. I answered with a decision to rest for a day and then begin paperwork. Those plans were made of lists and times. Tomorrow morning I would call her, Monday I'd sort important documents, and I needed to notify a landlord by letter on Wednesday. The language of logistics filled the space because actions create safety. At one point I had to tell Maya about the moment on the curb when he took off his ring. She smiled a small, understanding smile. "He always did things privately," she said. The sentence explained him better than any accusation I could have made. Maya's appraisal was a new piece of information. He was the kind of person who handled endings in silence, by taking an object away rather than making noise. That night I slept on Maya's couch with the cardigan folded on my chest like a shield. I woke early to the small sound of the kettle being set on again. The morning felt ordinary in its chores. A broom across a rug, a mug slid into my hand. The final paragraph of the morning was not a manifesto. It was the concrete beat the chapter required. I stood in Maya's kitchen, folded note in my palm, and set it carefully on the center of the table. The motion was small and deliberate. The kettle hissed and then went quiet. Maya filled my cup with coffee and waited until I lifted it. I looked at the paper one last time, fingers touching the crease, and then I let the motion end by leaning back and taking a measured sip. The note lay there and the house kept doing ordinary things. The clock ticked, a neighbor walked a dog outside, and I counted each movement like another turn in a lock. When I put the mug down, I did not explain my choice to anyone in a speech. I did not make a promise about who I would be. I simply stood, lifted the suitcase, and walked to the door to gather a few things for the day. Maya called out my name once and then fell quiet. The chapter's last beat landed on a concrete action. I closed the apartment door behind me and clicked the lock, sound precise and final. The lock clicked twice, as if to make sure the motion was heard. I walked down the hall toward a bus stop and the morning kept its ordinary movement around me.